Hi, and welcome to this tutorial summary recording for week 3. Just to reiterate, as I mentioned in the previous tutorial summary recording, it's very difficult in class to record an actual tutorial because it would require every student to have a microphone to be recorded by Zoom, and we don't have that facility at the moment. So this is a summary of what would be discussed in class. So I would always encourage you, firstly, to attend the tutorial, either on campus in class, or if you are an external student, to attend the live Zoom, because it gives you an opportunity to discuss your thoughts with others and get feedback from your tutor and from other students. So as with week 2, this week's tutorial has a few summary slides from the lecture of the previous week, and then a new case study exercise called the commute, which is in a similar style to that you're facing for assessment 1. And this case study has been used previously as an assessment in this unit. So the first thing you need to identify in assessment 1 is what is management's decision problem. So as you write up the assessment, we suggest you have a heading that says management decision problem, and then very clearly have a one-sentence statement or question about what is the practical problem facing management. Then have a line space, so we can clearly see what that one sentence MDP is. Have a line space and then a short paragraph just explaining your rationale for why you think that is the MDP. That rationale doesn't need to contain any references because the MDP can only come from the words written in that case. You won't find any external document that has relevant information in this case, so no references. That rationale is just to assist us to understand the logic of your MDP if it is different or slightly different to what we were expecting. So this MDP could be a major problem, it could be a minor problem, but usually worded fairly simply. It doesn't need any complex academic language. This is how management would be speaking in the boardroom. It could be about identifying a problem, it could be about solving a problem, it could be about a negative problem, or it could be a positive opportunity. So as I say, it's really important that you recognise the MDP can only come from the information that's written in the case. You can't make any assumptions, or if you have any knowledge of a similar business or problem, that's not relevant in this case. So you can't make any assumptions, and therefore no references are required in that particular section. Once we've identified the MDP, we then need to think a little bit differently to work out, well, what's the information that we need to address that problem? So this is the market research question. And this guides the researchers as to what type of data to collect that will address the MDP. So it's worded quite differently. It will often contain a broad construct. So typical marketing constructs here I've given you examples of include satisfaction, brand image, perceptions. These are constructs in that they're not directly observable. We can't measure them with one question. So your rationale, so again, we'd like you to have a heading that says marketing research question, have a line space, and then a brief rationale. Ideally, including a reference from the literature that defines your construct or your topic of interest. So if it's about satisfaction or about brand image or about perceptions or about brand loyalty or whatever construct or topic, provide a definition, an accepted definition of that, because that then helps us to work out how it could be measured. So the marketing research question is quite broad, and it needs to be broken down into more manageable objectives to collect the different data that's required. In the real world, we would have a range of objectives. There's no set number, but in this particular case for the assessment 1 and assessment 3 in this unit, I'm just requiring you to have 2 objectives. So these 2 objectives break down how that broad construct would be operationalized. In the last tutorial summary for CQ University, the case, I presented at least two objectives there of how it would measure brand position, which was the construct of interest in that case. Objectives always start with the word to. It's to do something. And in assessment 1, you won't have to use the word measure. So you won't be measuring anything because this is qualitative research. You are required to have one objective in the case for assessment 1 that relates to the repertory test. So I'm forcing upon you an extremely useful tool, the repertory test. It's a very efficient qualitative technique that I'm asking you to consider the appropriateness of for the case. So that would be one objective would be to collect the data in relation to the repertory test. Your second objective would be operationalized by any other qualitative method of your choosing. So there's no one perfect, there's no perfect wording for these objectives that we're looking for. So they are worded quite differently. The MDP is boardroom language. It's action orientated. They've got a problem. There could be an opportunity. What do we do in this particular case? We need information. So the marketing research question is information orientated. It's in researcher language, so they're both worded quite differently. So for example, an MDP could be how do we attract more repeat purchases at our restaurant? The MRQ could be, well, what are the antecedents of customer loyalty for this type of service? So what leads to loyalty? In this case, loyalty is the construct, and we would look to the literature to see how it's defined, and then to see how we measure loyalty. So the academic literature plays a big role in guiding our data collection once we've worked out what our construct of interest is. So the second half of the tutorial in class would be discussing the commute case, which, as I say, it's been used previously as an assessment in this unit. At this stage, I just suggest you pause this recording and reread the case and think firstly about what you think the MDP is for this case. So in class, we would firstly get students into groups and talk amongst themselves, share ideas on what they think the MDP is. Then we'd have a class discussion around that. Then go back into group discussion to work out what the marketing research question is. Class discussion, then go back into groups and look at the research objective for this case. Okay, so in this case, it states very early on that a decision has been made to launch this newspaper. So this is not a management decision problem about a feasibility study. That would be undertaken by accountants. The actual problem in this case is what newspaper format should the commute take to appeal to consumers. So as I say, the MDP would not be related to a feasibility study, which is believed beyond an exploratory research project. And there's no MDP relating to social media or online news product because it states that this is going to be a newspaper. So based on that, what format should the commute take? Have a think about, and maybe pause again and have a think about what you think the marketing research question would be to address that. Now, unless you're in the media game, I wouldn't expect you to come up with the construct that I have here, which is gratifications. I wanted to show you an example of another construct that has practical implications in marketing that we would find if we went to the literature, if we were spending time thinking about, well, what do people look for in their media. So anyone who's doing research in this area, if they spend any time in the academic literature looking at how other people have analysed what people are looking for in media consumption, they would likely come across a theory called uses and gratifications theory, which is ideal to set up studies of what people are looking for in their media. So based on my knowledge of uses and gratifications theory, I've come up with this marketing research question that says, what gratifications do consumers want from news media during their commute home? Now, I've used, and as I say, I'm not expecting that you would come up with that the stage of the unit. It's just an example to say how valuable the literature is in guiding us as to the different constructs that are out there. And once we find this in the literature, it guides us as to how other people have measured it. Another point that I want to make here is that I've used the word news media rather than newspaper in the MRQ, because even though the problem is about a newspaper format, we should be open to other ideas that about gratifications that people might get from other media that might be able to be converted into a newspaper format. So that's an example of a construct from the literature. You might come up with an MRQ that's around what makes readers satisfied with a newspaper. In that case, the construct would be satisfaction. So again, in your assessment for the MRQ, you'd have a brief paragraph with a rationale explaining why it's the construct of interest, and then a definition from the literature, because then once we have a definition of satisfaction, that then helps us to measure it. So take a pause on the video and think now, well, what would be a marketing research objective that we could develop from. So one objective that I've listed here is to identify features of news media that are important or salient for commuters. And this would ideally set up the repertory test. Now, in the week 4 lecture, I'll be talking about the value of the repertory test and what it's used for. And in week 5, we've got a case where you might consider how the repertory test could be used. So first objective, well, what features of news media are important for commuters? And then if there was a second objective, quite open to others exploring commuters' news needs, their news consumption habits, their perceptions, the appeal of a crossword section, for example. Or it could be related to identifying the perceptions of the commute with potential advertisers. So I hope this case has been helpful in presenting to you a different type of problem and a different marketing construct.